So this is late in the year, getting into really into our season, and right now these offshore fish have been pressured for a long time through the summer on those main schools. And so the fish will often do a lot of different things. Don't be afraid in late summer to get up a little bit shallow. We're in like 7.5 to 10 feet of water right now. And the reason that they're doing that is they're thinking about pressure will push them up here, but the bait and everything will just think about starting to move back into a pocket, starting to move into the mouth of a creek. And this is like the ultimate spot where we're at the mouth of a creek where they want to push back in to feed on some bait, but there's some hard structure out the front of it. And that's the key when it comes to like that depth. There needs to be a hard piece of structure for them to get on. And this is like a big rock ridge, rock road. There's some boulders. There's a little bit of everything for them to just stop up. And the big thing that I find as the season gets later is those fish, like, they don't want to set up on sort of a straight bottom or point as much. They want a piece of structure. They want something hard to get on, whether that's a brush pole, whether that's you know, a shell bar bottom, and then rock, you know, just something to sort of really sit on rather than getting like a big grouped up school like on an open point. The later the season gets, the more I look for like hard structures, and that's when 360 and live are gonna really come into play. 360 really shows you how hard the bottom is. We can see like this is hard bottom and this is soft where it's dark, and then it's showing us some big, you know, rock boulders, and it's basically showing you where you need to be casting and if that bottom is hard or not. And this is actually pretty shallow. It's like 7 to 10 feet. So for late summer, that's kind of shallow, but when you're out on a main ledge and you've got structure and there's a little bit of grass around, those fish are gonna slide and you get an overcast day. You know, that's the key. These Tennessee river systems, they love like an overcast day like this. I don't know what it is, especially on this lake we're on right now. You get an overcast day or a rainy day or a nasty day, wind, that you need to get out there. It's the day most people want to sit at home, but when it's like that, that's when you want to be coming out here. Those crystal clean bluebird days with no wind are some of the toughest that you'll get for catching bass. Got him, big one, dude. Big one. Oh yeah, a nice fish. Nice fish. Beautiful jig bass. Well, that's how we want to start the day. Didn't take too long. Big Molex jig, 3/4 ounce, X-Zone muscleback crawl. You've seen me catch a lot of fish on that jig, tournament and fun fishing. But look down here, this is what we came to, and 360 just showed us there's some bait, some fish. We've got MEGA Live TargetLock working, but that fish came actually off 360. I seen this perfect line and this perfect line of rock, and then I just waved live over it, and look at that. There's bait, there's fish. I cast right on the other side of this bait clump, and that fish was there. Good start, overcast morning, beautiful jig bass. This setup right here is the greatest electronic setup I've personally ever seen, ever used, ever had on my boat, or on anyone's boat for that matter. And competing against the best guys in the world. Yeah, baby! Woo! Yes! Carl Jocumsen! This is what it takes, but even when we come out and we just fish, it just consistently helps me catch bass, break down new lakes faster. The big one that gets, if you talk to myself, Brandon, a lot of the Humminbird guys that know, 360 is really one of our main components, and then live, one look down, and I can see exactly where those rocks are running, where there's no man's land, where there's isolated individual things to target, where the main, where your main cast and the main bulk of those fish are gonna be. And then I can just use live to wave it, and look at that, you can see live those fish, those rocks, there's fish, look at that there. So now I'm using live to sort of then see what's on top of those rocks, what's in that brush pile, where my bait's falling. And it's sort of, live is really then helping you to learn more about that spot. So for me, I can actually see these fish moving, look at them. They're moving all through here. There's some good ones right there, sitting off the rock. So I'm in there now, one's got it. Oh, he had it. Give it a hop. Oh, he took my leg. See it, Phil. Eat again. But that's what Mega Live's doing. It's giving you like the live time, the live response, how your bait's falling, where your bait's positioned, and then where those fish are actually positioned on that spot. The biggest key with them is actually cast angles as well as the bait, but a lot of it is angles, getting the right angle. And when it gets this late in the season, everything needs to be perfect. You're not just gonna roll up on a big school and just start wearing them out. And so what TargetLock is doing is allowing me to keep this rock, keep these fish in my view on my live screen, and then just continually change my cast angle until I figure out exactly how they want it. It's given me spot lock back, so as you can see, I'm in spot lock. I'm holding in the wind, and I'm able to just search with my live without affecting my spot lock position. So this is a really good area. This is a lot of rock in here, and there's some fish in here. And now I can, on my screen, or I can hit TargetLock, and now my Mega Live's locked on there, and I could literally do a big 100-foot circle around that clump, around that roadbed, and just change angles the whole time. And that rock clump's gonna be on my live screen the entire time. When it comes to offshore fishing, structure fishing, jig fishing, the key of it all is for that bait to come through that structure and not get stuck. If you're getting stuck right where you need to be getting a bite. And so I've had a lot to do with the design of all of my Molex baits. This is one of my Molex jigs, but this head shape, it's like a heart shape, and we call it the GT football jig. The key with it, as you just saw, it just came through. It's coming through all this rock. So I'm getting maximum cast. I'm getting the jig to move through this heavy structure that normally most baits, Carolina rig, anything is gonna get stuck, but I'm making clean, long casts and just covering like good ground and not continually getting stuck. But one of the things when you're dragging a jig is if I keep my rod tip like this and I drag it, it's gonna be pulling that jig like directly into all of those rocks. And if it's gravel and you know, a shell bar and stuff like that, that's what you wanna do. You wanna keep in contact and you wanna drag that jig, keep it 100% along the bottom the entire way. But if you get around big rock and big boulders like rip wrap style, you're just gonna pull it right into literally and just wedge it in between where two rocks are. And so that's when, this is kind of my little secret when it comes to rip wrap fishing and, you know, real chunk rock style, is I'm gonna keep my rod tip up and I'm gonna pull it over those rocks, over each thing. I don't wanna just drag it towards me. And so my rod tip's actually gonna be high, and I'm gonna wind down, and then I'm gonna pick that jig up and let it hit the rock and then fall back down. Let it get on the bottom, pick that jig up, let it fall. And that way I can control the jig and I can get it in and out through all those gaps without just basically dragging it until it wedges into a rock. I've got 2 jig rods, Miller Rod Jig Freak Light and then Jig Freak Power. Jig Freak Light for 1/2 ounce and less, Jig Freak Power for 1/2, 3/4 ounce. And then Shimano Curado's 200 HG. The smallest ratio I fish is a 7/4 to 1. If I know there's some really big fish around, I like the 7/4 to 1. It's a bit more like a winch, you have more control. But generally with a jig, if I'm making lots of casts, I'll use an 8.5 to 1. So nice and fast, I can burn that jig back in and get it back out there because I'm not winding the reel, I'm using the rod to drag that jig. And then I fish lighter fluorocarbon than most. Sunline, shooter's great, and then the FC Sniper, and I use, I've go down to 14 sometimes. When you go to 14, you need to make sure that the jig has a lighter hook in it, so you get that penetration, and generally 16 and 18 is the max that I use on a big jig. So again, talking about fishing, 7 to 10 feet in late summer seems shallow, but one of the biggest keys is we're not driving over a huge area of shallow water to get to 7 to 10 feet. There's deep water close, there's ledges close, there's creek channels close. That's the main thing. You can catch fish, less than 7 feet all summer long, and way up into late summer, but you have to have deep water close. It has to be a quick transition for them to just slide up and get around that structure and feed and then be able to go back to deep water. So when you're looking at that shallow water when it comes to late summer, make sure there's deep water close.